Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, February 18, 2026. Federal Communications Commission Chair Brendan Carr says journalists were tricked into covering claims by late-night talk show host Stephen Colbert that he was blocked by CBS from interviewing U.S. Senate candidate from Texas, James Talarico. Early voting in Texas has gotten underway this week. We'll talk with Texas Tribune reporter Kayla Guo about the Senate race with competitive primaries in both parties and also the new congressional district maps drawn to favor Republicans. Billionaire Les Wexner tells members of Congress he was not a co-conspirator of the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and says he was duped by a world-class con man. He was deposed at his home in Ohio. Day 5 of the Homeland Security Department shutdown over disagreements about federal immigration operations changes. We'll get updates from the White House and the House Democratic leader. President Donald Trump hosts a Black History Month reception at the White House. Maryland Governor Wes Moore says President Trump has been telling lies about the state and federal response to the massive sewage spill in the Potomac River. And the United Nations Security Council holds a meeting on Middle East peace efforts, with the Secretary General's office expressing concern about Israel's actions in the West Bank. Reuters, writing the chair of the Federal Communications Commission on Wednesday, denied the government had censored CBS late-night talk show host Stephen Colbert from airing a candidate interview and confirmed that the agency is investigating ABC's The View. FCC Chair Brendan Carr confirmed the FCC had opened an enforcement action into whether the ABC daytime talk show violated equal time rules for interviews with political candidates. Colbert said on Monday the network's lawyers barred him from airing an interview with Democratic Texas State Representative James Talarico, who's running for his party's nomination for the U.S. Senate, after the FCC issued new guidance in January that said daytime and late-night talk shows were not automatically exempt from equal time rules for candidate interviews. That was from Reuters. FCC Chair Brendan Carr, a Republican, spoke at a news conference in Washington.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, John Hind with Politico. Wanted to ask about how you think your equal time guidance has been going so far over the last few weeks. Specifically, curious, at this point, is there any concern that there could be, fewer voices on air because of that? And curious how you're seeing the Colbert incident this week. Obviously there was an interview that was not aired at this point. Are you at all concerned that companies might, look at the situation and, simply choose not to mess with that at all? Like, where does that all fit right now when you're looking at things now, just a few weeks into the new guidance?
Well, look, when I step back and look at the entire arc of the news story yesterday, I was highly entertained. I think it was probably one of the most fun days I've had on the job, watching sort of the hilarity of how this story played out. I mean, look, anybody that's not suffering from a terminal case of Trump derangement syndrome could see right away yesterday the exact story arc and how it was going to play out. You had a Democrat candidate who understood the way that the news media works, and he took advantage of all of your sort of prior conceptions to run a hoax, apparently for the purpose of raising money and getting clicks. And the news media played right into it. I think yesterday was a perfect encapsulation of why the American people have more trust in gas station sushi than they do in the national news media. And this was very plainly an effort ginned up to get clicks and to raise money. And you guys ate it up like slop. And when it was pointed out that the facts were completely different than what the fake news media was running with, nobody did like an about face and did a fact correction. They just pivoted and moved away. And again, I think this is why the American people simply don't trust the news media anymore. As Jasmine Crockett herself came out yesterday afternoon and said, there was no censorship by the government here. What she said was a reflection of what CBS itself had said, which they advised Colbert, there's lots of ways you can do this, including having all the legally qualified candidates on. But for some reason, they chose not to do this. Congress passed the equal time provision for a very specific reason. They didn't want the media elites in Hollywood and New York to put their thumb on the scale and pick the winners and losers in primaries and general elections. That's the whole point. And I get it that people may not like that, but that's the law that Congress passed. At the end of the day, this is about empowering individual people to vote and decide for themselves who they want to represent them. The whole idea here is more speech, not less. You can have more candidates on. There is zero censorship with the equal time provision. It's about empowering people. But again, there was one partisan candidate who fed this slop to the mainstream national news media, and you guys ran for it with hours. And I was just laughing because I was watching, and it was clear that this story is going to turn at some point, and the truth is going to come out. But I thought it was just interesting to observe as sort of a microcosm of the lack of trust in the media.
FCC Chair Brendan Carr, a Republican at a news conference in Washington, D.C. James Talarico, a state representative from Texas and a Democrat who is running for his party's nomination in the U.S. Senate race in that state, held a rally today in Austin, Texas, and spoke about this.
The 24 hours before this tour launch has been something else. Last night, I filmed an interview with Stephen Colbert on The Late Show. And as you probably know by now, Trump's FCC colluded with corporate media executives at CBS to keep that interview off the air. But I think it's safe to say that their plan backfired. I think Donald Trump and his billionaire friends know that we're about to take back Texas. And these are the same people who ran against cancel culture. And now they're trying to control what we watch, what we say, what we read. And this is the most dangerous kind of cancel culture, the kind that comes from the top. They went after The View after I went on there. They went after Jimmy Kimmel for telling a joke they didn't like. They went after Stephen Colbert for telling the truth about Paramount's bribe to Donald Trump. Corporate media executives are selling out the First Amendment to curry favor with corrupt politicians. A threat to any of our First Amendment rights is a threat to all of our First Amendment rights. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whether you're conservative or progressive, the real fight in this country is not left versus right, it's top versus bottom.
James Talarico, Texas State Representative and Democratic U.S. Senate candidate, today in Austin, Texas. Washington Post writing that Stephen Colbert's interview with James Talarico was posted on the show's YouTube channel, where it has so far received more than 5 million views. In Texas, there's also a contested Republican primary for the Senate race. Incumbent John Cornyn is being challenged by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Here are a few of the ads in that matchup. The Cornyn ad features former Texas Department of Public Safety Director Stephen McCraw, and the Paxton ad has the endorsement of President Donald Trump.
I served as the Director of Public Safety under Governor Greg Abbott and led the Texas Rangers. Take it from me, John Cornyn is tough as nails on illegal immigration. Senator Cornyn votes with President Trump 99% of the time, securing funding to finish the wall, then hiring new ICE and Border Patrol officers. Cornyn and Trump delivered $11 billion to Texas taxpayers for Biden's open border. That's strong leadership.
I'm John Cornyn, and I approve this message. Join my team and give today.
An attorney general who has really led the way, somebody who has been brave and strong, Ken Paxton.
It's going to take a patriot like Ken Paxton to make America great again.
He's very, very talented. He's a very talented guy.
And a really great attorney general. Ken Paxton, tremendous guy. I wish I had him in the White House with me. The great Ken Paxton.
Ken Paxton for U.S. Senate.
I'm Ken Paxton, and I approve this message.
Some of the campaign ads running in Texas, and joining us now to talk about the Texas elections is Kayla Guo, state politics and government reporter with the Texas Tribune. Thank you for being with us. So that Senate race in Texas, you've got competitive primaries for both Republicans and Democrats. Let's start with the Republican side. Where do things stand?
I think things seem to be, it's tough to imagine who is in the front right now. You have the incumbent John Cornyn, who is facing the most competitive primary of his career against Attorney General Ken Paxton and U.S. Congressman Wesley Hunt of Houston. Paxton has been leading in polling more recently, but Cornyn has dropped tens of millions of dollars on the airwaves to, keep Paxton and Hunt down and to support his own bid. I think that race is destined for a May runoff, given that there are three candidates and one of them would have to get more than 50% of the vote on March 3rd to win. But it's been really bitter. It's been really intense, and Cornyn has really dominated the airwaves trying to stay ahead.
And President Donald Trump has not endorsed yet, has he?
He hasn't, and he, I think this past weekend, said that he liked all three of the candidates and wasn't going to weigh in at this point, even though I think all three candidates have been asking him to, and Senate Republican leadership especially has been asking him to back John Cornyn, and seeing that would be a fairly big boost for him in this primary.
And on the Democratic side, also a competitive primary, and just to link it, is it fair to say that some of those Democratic candidates are running because they'd like to run against Ken Paxton on the Republican side?
I think that's totally fair. I think the common wisdom on the Democratic side is Ken Paxton. He has a trail of legal and ethical baggage that he has pretty much emerged pretty unscathed from, but that Democrats think will be harmful to him in a general election. They also expect whichever Republican nominee to emerge from this contest to be fairly bruised because it's been such a bitter contest, and they're hoping also more broadly that turnout among Democrats will surge this midterm election under the Trump administration.
On the Democratic side of the Texas Senate primary, how has this whole Stephen Colbert interview with James Talarico story affected the race?
I think it brought James Talarico enormous name recognition and notoriety, which is, I think, just the boost his campaign probably needed going to early voting. Yesterday was the first day of early voting here in Texas. He was the lesser known, I think probably still is the lesser known candidate from Jasmine Crockett, who entered the contest with really high name recognition among Democratic primary voters. Talarico announced that he raised $2.5 million in the 24 hours after the interview, which is a huge amount of money on top of the huge amount of money he's already raised over the course of this campaign. I think it brought a lot of eyeballs onto his campaign and certainly feels like it shifts momentum in his favor going into the early voting period.
Have there been any debates in the primaries, either Democratic or Republican?
There has been one Democratic Senate debate that happened, I believe it was earlier last month, and Talarico and Jasmine Crockett faced off at a debate hosted by a union group, and that was it, though. There has not been a debate on the Republican side, and I don't think we expect one.
We're talking with Kayla Guo with the Texas Tribune. I guess we've been talking a bit about personalities and money. What issues are front and center in that Senate race in Texas?
I think on the Democratic side, there's a lot of emphasis on affordability. I think Jasmine Crockett and James Talarico are fairly aligned on the issues themselves. So I think we've heard Talarico push a much more forward economic populist message. Jasmine Crockett has sort of a very comprehensive fighting back against Republicans, standing up to the Trump administration message. But I think on the issues themselves, are really quite aligned, and Talarico especially has been focused on sort of this anti-billionaire top versus bottom campaign. I think on the Republican side, the argument that Cornyn's primary challengers have been making against him is that Cornyn is, an establishment Republican who is out of step with Trump's MAGA movement, and Ken Paxton and Wesley Hunt would submit that they are better aligned with the party's base, whereas Cornyn, I think, is making the argument that, character matters, and Paxton's legal baggage is not going to help him in the general election, and that he himself has the experience to do well in Washington and has proven that over decades in office.
Texas was ground zero for the partisan congressional redistricting efforts by Republicans, now being matched by Democrats nationwide. Are the new maps being used for the primaries underway, and how is it looking? The Republicans think they can pick up 5 seats.
They are being used this election season. I think it has definitely caused, I think our reporters have found on the ground in places like Houston, it's caused a bit of confusion among primary voters who have been moved to new districts, especially voters who had special elections to deal with. I'm thinking of Texas 18 in Houston. I think the general understanding has been Republicans obviously drew the map to notch 5 additional seats in November. I think the expectation was they could get at least 3, and 2 seats in South Texas were a little more competitive with strong Democratic candidates defending those seats. But I think increasingly in more recent weeks, we've seen concern from Republicans that maybe they might not even be able to defend those 3 seats or take those 3 seats that they have been aiming for, and that there are some open seats that Democrats might be able to fight for as well. I think we've heard John Cornyn make the argument many, many times that if Ken Paxton is at the top of the ticket, that would hurt down ballot Republicans. And Democrats are certainly feeling bullish and, really locked in after some special election wins more recently as well.
Kayla Guo, state politics and government reporter with the Texas Tribune. Find her articles at texastribune.org. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
This is C-SPAN Radio's Washington Today. Associated Press reporting the billionaire behind the retail empire that once blanketed shopping malls with names such as Victoria's Secret and Abercrombie & Fitch is telling members of Congress that he was duped by a world-class con man. Close financial advisor Jeffrey Epstein. Les Wexner also is denying knowing about the convicted sex offender's crimes or participating in Epstein's abuse of girls and young women. He said, "I was naive, foolish, and gullible to put any trust in Jeffrey Epstein. He was a con man, and while I was conned, I have done nothing wrong and have nothing to hide." That reporting from Associated Press. The deposition was conducted at Les Wexner's estate in New Albany, Ohio, by members of the U.S. House Oversight and Reform Committee. Some of the Democratic members spoke to reporters outside, led by Robert Garcia of California, the committee's ranking member.
It's been clear to us, at least the way Mr. Wexner has presented this, that he, according to him, has not been questioned by the FBI or the DOJ about Mr. Epstein. How outrageous is that? He's someone that's been named by survivors, someone that's in the files more than most people, someone that's clearly the financial benefactor to Jeffrey Epstein and has not been contacted or interviewed by the FBI or the DOJ. What the hell is going on? That is shameful. We should be ashamed as a government. The survivors deserve justice. So that's something that we are going to continue to press today, and certainly press with Pam Bondi and the DOJ. And the second thing, something that I think is critical to all of us, I think this community should also be asking questions. This community deserves to know why the most powerful man and one of the richest men, if not the richest man in Ohio, gave so much of his wealth to the largest modern sex trafficking ring in American history. Why his money was used to traffic, abuse, and rape women and children. And so I think this community has questions of Mr. Wexner. Ohio State should have questions of Mr. Wexner. And Mr. Wexner's involvement and our questions, today's not the end of our questions for Mr. Wexner, it's the beginning of our questions for Mr. Wexner and anyone in this community across Ohio or the country that has done business dealing or that knows why he provided so much money for Jeffrey Epstein to then go on and commit all these horrible crimes. We can answer a couple questions.
How often is he? A couple questions. First off, you mentioned in Les Wexner's opening statement, he said that he did not have any knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein's crime. Do you believe he's lying? Maybe he doesn't know about the Second, you have David, the farmer, said that Jeffrey Epstein going back had sexually abused her at Wexner State, and that the Wexner security guards really let her leave. You guys have done that incident at all during the
Let me start by saying that I personally, I do not believe when Mr. Wexner says that he did not have a personal relationship or a criminal relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. I think that is bogus. Personally. I think I can also say that we believe the survivors. And I think the farmer testimony is critical. And what happened to not just Maria, but to Annie and the farmer women was horrific. And this idea that she gave such a description of what happened to her, and somehow we should just dismiss that as a lie or untrue, I think is outrageous. There's no question in my mind that there was a relationship and that Mr. Wexner is very aware, likely aware of what was going on.
Congressman Robert Garcia, Democrat from California, Oversight and Government Reform Committee ranking member, at a news conference with other members of the committee in New Albany, Ohio. They said that no Republicans showed up to today's deposition. Joining us now with more on the House Oversight Committee's deposition of Les Wexner in the Jeffrey Epstein investigation is Megan Henry, a reporter with the Ohio Capital Journal. Thanks for joining us. Who is Les Wexner and what is his connection to Jeffrey Epstein?
Yes, well, thanks for having me. Les Wexner is Ohio's richest man, and he has donated to many politicians, more so Republicans, but he has donated to Democrats as well. And he has had this long-term relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein was his financial advisor for several years, and then they cut ties with their relationship. But now these new records indicate that that might not be the case.
Is Les Wexner being accused of any crimes? And if so, what crimes and by whom?
Yeah, it sounds like today, as far as the deposition, that it was just to uncover more about Wexner's relationship with Epstein. Wexner has not been charged at this moment with any criminal charges, so that remains to be seen.
What do we know about the questions that the members of Congress are asking?
Well, Wexner, he's been listed as an alleged co-conspirator of Epstein's in a 2019 FBI document. So as far as the questions, I don't totally know, but I think it's safe to assume that it's just about the relationship with Epstein and how much he knew about Epstein's criminal activity.
Well, you said that the documents have uncovered that the relationship was different than he had said it was. What has he been saying, and what do the documents show?
Yeah, Wexner has not been saying much. When reached out to his spokesperson says no comments. His legal representation says that, quote, the assistant U.S. attorney told Mr. Wexner's legal counsel in 2019 that Mr. Wexner was neither a co-conspirator nor a target in any respect. Mr. Wexner cooperated fully by providing background information on Epstein and was never contacted again, end quote. So Wexner has been very much out of the limelight. He's a very prominent figure in Columbus historically, but he has been not very public-facing these past several years.
Democratic members of Congress who have spoken out said that they are following the money. Where does the money trail lead? What type of political activities has Wexner been into?
Yeah, so Les Wexner has been a big donor for political candidates on the federal state level here in Ohio and even at the local level at the Columbus, Ohio level. And so he has donated, as I mentioned, more so to Republicans, but some Democrats. But it's really starting last week and over the weekend and this week, we've seen some politicians give the money that Wexner has donated to them over the years and been donating it to charities to help victims of human trafficking or of child abuse. So some notable ones include Representative Joyce Beatty here, Ohio's own, as well as John Husted, who has taken or has received lots of money from Wexner over the years. And after some significant pushback, he finally has said he's going to donate the funds to charities.
You mentioned that Les Wexner was a private individual. Did he ever socialize with Epstein in public?
According to some reporting I've read from my other colleagues, it sounds like Wexner did not join Epstein, is not known to join Epstein at some of Epstein's parties or social events, but there he has been involved, was at some events such as like birthday parties and the like over the years, but was not always in attendance at some of Epstein's social events.
Megan Henry, reporter with the Ohio Capital Journal. You can find her stories at ohiocapitaljournal.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the U.S. House Oversight and Government Reform Committee's next scheduled depositions in the Jeffrey Epstein investigation are Hillary Clinton on February 26th, Bill Clinton on February 27th, Richard Kahn, Epstein's accountant, on March 11th, and Darren Indyke, Epstein's lawyer, on March 19th. The Homeland Security Department is still shut down now for a fifth day. It affects the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, Transportation Security Administration, TSA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency, CISA, and the U.S. Coast Guard. The White House and congressional Democrats are still at odds over the Democrats' demands that a funding bill to reopen the department include reforms to federal immigration enforcement. The White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt was asked for an update at her news conference at the White House.
We're now in this partial shutdown over DHS funding. Has the president personally spoken to the Democratic leaders in Congress? Can we expect to see them at the White House to try to make a deal on this?
Not to my knowledge. He hasn't had any direct conversation or correspondence with Democrat lawmakers recently. It doesn't mean he's not willing to. I'm just not aware of any conversations that have taken place. I do know the White House and the president's representatives have been in direct conversations with both Democrats and Republicans. But of course, Democrats are the reason that the Department of Homeland Security is currently shut down. They have chosen to act against the American people for political reasons. And now we have FEMA workers, the men and women of the United States Coast Guard, men and women of TSA who keep our airports moving, who will be working without paychecks for no good reason other than the Democrats wanting to pick a fight with Donald Trump. And the president thinks that is irresponsible and despicable. He wants the government to be open. We've been engaged in good faith negotiations with the Democrats. Last night, they sent over a counter proposal that, frankly, was very unserious, and we hope they get serious very soon because Americans are going to be impacted by this. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline. President Trump has talked about a forthcoming executive order on voter ID. Is there more details you can provide for that? And can you talk about any steps that you're taking to overcome court challenges that you've kind of faced in this area before on voting?
Well, as the president said in that Truth Social post, he's discussing and exploring legal options for a potential executive order with respect to voter ID. But this is something he's made very clear he wants Congress to get done. The Save America Act is a common sense piece of legislation that has now passed the House of Representatives to ensure that voter ID is a requirement in the United States of America. This is a common sense policy that nearly 90% of the country agrees with. You need an ID to go and purchase alcohol. You need an ID to go to the library and check out a book. And so the president thinks you should have an ID to vote in our nation's elections. And I know the vast majority of Americans agree with him on that. And he wants Congress to move quickly to get it done.
White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt at a news conference in the White House briefing room. The House and Senate are not in session this week. The House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, did hold a news conference in the U.S. Capitol building in Washington and started with the Homeland Security Department shutdown and federal immigration reform.
This is day 5 of the Trump Republican shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security. Why are we in this moment? It's because Republicans have decided that they would rather shut down FEMA, shut down TSA, and shut down the Coast Guard than get ICE under control. The American people know that ICE needs to be reined in. We believe that taxpayer dollars should be used to make your life more affordable, not to brutalize or kill American citizens in cold blood, like Renee Nicole Good or Alex Preddy, or to violently target law-abiding immigrant families, which we know is taking place all across America. The American people are horrified at what they have seen. But instead of fixing the problem, which Democrats have given our Republican colleagues an opportunity to do, they've shut down crucial parts of the Department of Homeland Security. It is our view that immigration enforcement in this country should be fair, it should be just, and it should be humane. That's not what's happening right now in the United States of America. And that's why ICE needs to be reformed in a dramatic, bold, meaningful, and transformational manner. And if that doesn't happen, the DHS funding bill will not move forward.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, holding a news conference on Capitol Hill. CNN writing the Trump administration has ordered the Federal Emergency Management Agency to suspend the deployment of hundreds of aid workers to disaster-torn areas around the U.S. while the Department of Homeland Security is shut down. According to sources and internal messages obtained by CNN, the new edict comes even though most deployments are paid for through a disaster relief fund that isn't affected by the shutdown. Again, reporting from CNN. NBC News writing at least a dozen Democratic members of Congress plan to boycott President Donald Trump's State of the Union address at the Capitol next Tuesday and are scheduled to attend a rally on the National Mall. Progressive groups Move On and Midas Touch announced Wednesday that they're hosting the People's State of the Union rally at 8:30 p.m. Eastern near the Capitol. The event is billed as counter-programming to, quote, President Trump's night full of lies and misplaced priorities for the American people. The group said Democratic lawmakers will be joined on stage by the everyday Americans most impacted by Trump's dangerous agenda. And it was reporting from NBC News. Congressman Jeffries, at his news conference today, was asked about the potential boycott.
You did mention the State of the Union. Can you just let us know, we've heard there's a lot of, calls for Democrats to boycott the annual speech. What, again, is your advice to the House Democratic Caucus on the approach for Tuesday?
Well, as we approach the State of the Union address, my view remains the same, which is that the two options that are in front of us in our House is to either attend with silent defiance or to not attend and send a message to Donald Trump in that fashion, which will include participation in a variety of different alternate programming that is going to take place in and around the Capitol complex.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. A few moments later in this news conference, another reporter asked about his plans.
You outlined two different possibilities for Democratic members for the State of the Union. Do you plan to attend, and which of those options will you take?
My current plan is to attend. We're not going to Donald Trump's house. He's coming to our house. It's my view that you don't let anyone ever run you off of your block.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, the minority leader at a news conference in Washington. And Washington Today continues in a moment.
And we are going to renew unlimited promise of the American dream. Every single day we will stand up and we will fight for the country our citizens believe in.
Watch the C-SPAN networks live Tuesday, February 24th, as President Donald Trump delivers the annual State of the Union address before a joint session of Congress. The speech will mark President Trump's first State of the Union of his second term. The State of the Union address, live Tuesday, February 24th. Our coverage starts at 7 p.m. Eastern on the C-SPAN networks. C-SPAN, bringing you democracy unfiltered.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Associated Press writing that President Donald Trump hosted a White House reception for Black History Month on Wednesday, less than 2 weeks after he sparked a bipartisan outcry by posting a racist video on social media that depicted former President Barack Obama and his wife Michelle Obama as primates in a jungle. Trump on Wednesday didn't reference the video, which he deleted after a widespread backlash, but said he won't apologize for posting. He also did not reference Barack Obama, the nation's first black president, but spoke of other history-making black Americans. He said, "We celebrate Black History Month. We honor the memory of those who came before us by continuing their legacy." That was from Associated Press. He also called up a number of African Americans in his administration to talk about Black History Month. Here is Leo Terrell, senior counsel to the Assistant Attorney General.
We are living under the administration of the greatest president in our lifetime. And we have the hottest country in our lifetime. And I want to make sure the mainstream media knows this, because you represent the people who basically counter what the mainstream media has done. President Trump was the president who fully funded historically black colleges and universities. President Trump took the lead and performed criminal justice reform. President Trump made sure that we had opportunity zones. Let me close by saying this. This country is at a crossroads, and we have the right president at the right time. And if you want school choice, like I know you do, President Trump wants it. If you want a law and order society and secure border, President Trump wants that. And more importantly, I say this because this is the greatest country on the planet. American citizens should decide American election. Vote for the SAVE Act.
Leo Terrell, senior counsel to the Assistant Attorney General at today's White House reception for Black History Month. President Trump himself also spoke about his support for various issues, the historically black colleges and universities, opportunity zones, criminal justice reform, crime prevention, and school choice. He also recognized African American leaders in U.S. history.
But we thank God for the strength and courage and grit and devotion of black Americans who have helped make America the most powerful country in the history of the world we now have. And you saw that with our attack a few weeks ago on Venezuela. We have the greatest military in the world. We make the greatest equipment in the world. There's nobody even close. Nearly 10,000 African Americans fought for the Patriot cause in the Revolutionary War. Did you know that? 10,000, and it's actually a number I've heard higher than that, helping secure our independence in every generation since, from the Buffalo Soldiers to the Tuskegee Airmen. Black Americans have stepped forward to defend the flag and to defend our country like few others, really, like few others. And you've never really been given the recognition that you should get for that. You know that, Ben? I don't think a lot of people have given the kind of recognition, but everyone knows all about the Tuskegee Airmen. They were great and amazing. The Buffalo Soldiers, do you know the Buffalo Soldiers? Good stuff, right? From jazz to the blues, that you know, that you do get recognition for. Jazz, the blues, from rock and roll to rap, black artists like Chuck Berry, Muddy Waters. How about Nicki Minaj? Do we love Nicki Minaj? Right? I love Nicki Minaj. She was here a couple of weeks ago. She's so beautiful. Her skin's so beautiful. I said, Nicki is so beautiful. Her nails are like that long. I said, Nicki, are they real? She said, she didn't want to get into that. But she was so beautiful and so great. And she gets it, you know, more importantly, frankly, she gets it. But black leaders from Frederick Douglass to Martin Luther King, right? Little relative over here, have made our country freer, and really what they've really done is made life more just.
President Donald Trump at a Black History Month reception at the White House. At the start of his remarks, he paid tribute to the Reverend Jesse Jackson, civil rights leader and former presidential candidate who died earlier this week at the age of 84.
I want to begin by expressing our sadness at the passing of a person who I knew very well. Jesse was a piece of work, I want to tell you. He was a piece of work, but he was a good man. He was a real hero, and I just want to pay my highest respects to Reverend Jesse Jackson. He's a good man. He was actually, as you got to know him, he got better and better all the time. A lot of people, you get to know him, they get worse and worse. Jesse got better and better. But I knew him well long before becoming president, and he really was special with lots of personality, grit, and street smarts. You would say Jesse had serious street smarts, right? A very important ingredient to life, I will tell you. He was gregarious and someone who truly loved people and a force of nature. He was somebody that we're going to greatly miss, and on behalf of everyone here today, I know you join me in sending our condolences to the entire family. Had a great family.
President Donald Trump at a Black History Month reception at the White House. He issued a proclamation at the start of February about Black History Month that reads in part, "I proclaim that Black history is not distinct from American history. Rather, the history of Black Americans is an indispensable chapter in our grand American story." LA Times writing from jokes about his well-known stubbornness to tears grieving the loss of a parent. The adult children of the Reverend Jesse L. Jackson Sr. gave an emotional tribute Wednesday honoring the legacy of the late civil rights icon a day after his death. Jackson died Tuesday at his home in Chicago after battling a rare neurological disorder that affected his ability to move and speak. Standing on the steps outside his longtime Chicago home, 5 of his children, including Congressman Jonathan Jackson, remembered him not only for his decades-long work in civil rights, but also for his role as spiritual leader and father. That was reporting from the LA Times. During that news conference, a reporter asked about the late Reverend Jesse Jackson's commitment to promoting diversity and equal opportunity, and Congressman Jonathan Jackson answered.
Evelyn Holmes from Channel 7. There's been a lot of conversation about the Reverend's legacy, and I'm not sure that could truly be articulated through words, considering the expanse of it. But what I'd like you to do is if you could talk a little bit about what concerns you have moving forward, the work that has been done. You've already kind of alluded to that. How do you fill that void? How do we keep moving forward with his vision and the vision for equity and inclusion?
Well, thank you so much. I had the opportunity to speak as the co-chair at the National Prayer Breakfast, and you bring up the question of how do we, and you bring up and I had to ask myself, what would my father want me to do? Someone asked me, how did I get that position to be the co-chair of the National Prayer Breakfast? I said it was easy, nobody wanted it. And so diversity, equity, inclusion has been a major part of my father's work. These are the on rails, if you will, the guardrails to fight against racism and to bring about inclusion, to make this a better country. And so I started my remarks off in the Latin. I said, imago Dei, verbium Dei. Once you spell Dei in Latin, it's spelled D-E-I. Come on. So we've never retreated from the term DEI. 7 days after the president was sworn in on January 20th of 2025, my colleague Congressman Cleo Fields, who's a protege of my father, we started the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Caucus. So it is something that we're unashamed of. We look forward to the debates on the United States congressional floor. It's something we cannot retreat from. Off of the voting floor in the United States Capitol, women only got a restroom in 2011. Wow. The first woman to graduate from the Citadel graduated in 1999. We can't say we've made enough progress on race and equity and racial justice. We've seen the effects of the DOGE cuts. They targeted African American women disproportionately. When we see the retreat on these programs, they are harming our healthcare studies, our access to academia. It's wrong to tell the Northwestern University that they're going to be held hostage and have to pay for their pay a $75 million fund to retreat. So we're not backing up, and we can do this in civil discourse. And so this is part of the work. And it's just not one man or one woman's work. It's everybody that's felt challenged to speak up, speak out. We're against censorship of comedians. We're against the rollback of the racial and economic progress that we've made. We're going to have more time to talk to that. I just want to focus on the responsibility of a son. I am so proud that it's our loss is heaven's gain, and the legacy that my father leaves behind. And I want every child that's listening and watching this that Reverend Jesse Jackson didn't start in this house.
Come on, John. Come on here.
Take your time, Jack. Sorry. That he would tell you Jesse Jackson's his third name.
My mind now.
For the children that have to be adopted and stepfathers and lives have to be transformed. We come from that lineage. We've been in the food pantry, and that's our calling, that's our mission, and that's what we're going to fight for.
Congressman Jonathan Jackson, Democrat from Illinois, at a news conference in Chicago with 4 other children of Reverend Jesse Jackson, who died Tuesday at the age of 84. Spectrum News reporting about this news conference. A celebration of life for the late Reverend Jesse Jackson will take place next week in Chicago. His family announced Wednesday his body will lie in state at the headquarters of the Rainbow Push Coalition he founded 30 years ago to advocate for civil rights and economic justice, followed by a church service and final celebration February 28th, the family said, reporting from Spectrum News. This is Washington Today. From the Washington Post, Kevin Hassett, a top economic advisor to President Donald Trump, on Wednesday assailed a study from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, finding that U.S. companies shoulder most of the costs of tariffs, calling for the central bank to punish the researchers behind the work, which he characterized as an embarrassment. Reporting from the Washington Post, Kevin Hassett was interviewed on CNBC.
The paper is an embarrassment. It's, I think, the worst paper I've ever seen in the history of the Federal Reserve System. The people associated with this paper should presumably be disciplined because what they've done is they've put out a conclusion which has created a lot of news that's highly partisan based on analysis that wouldn't be accepted in a first semester econ class. The bottom line is that if you're wondering like who bears the burden of something, of a tariff, then you remember, Joe, you got supply curves, demand curves, you shift them around, you got consumer surplus, you got producer surplus, and then you look and see how it all works out in the end. And they're basically only looking at changes in prices. So they're assuming that quantities don't move at all. But guess what? Quantities did move at all. So the basic theory of President Trump's tariffs is that we're importing stuff from China, but we got producers in the U.S. that make the same stuff, maybe at a slightly higher price. If we bring the stuff home, create the demand at home, then that will hurt China and drive up wages in the U.S., and American consumers will be better off. So what have we seen? Prices have gone down. Inflation is down over time. Import prices dropped a lot in the first half of the year and then leveled off, and real wages were up $1,400 on average last year, which means that consumers were made better off by the tariffs. And so consumers couldn't have been made better off by the tariffs if this New York Fed analysis was correct. It's really just an embarrassment.
Kevin Hassett, director of the White House National Economic Council, today on CNBC. More from the Washington Post article. In a study published last week, the New York Fed found that U.S. companies and consumers absorbed nearly 90% of the economic burden imposed by tariffs in 2025. The New York Fed officials wrote, "Our results show that the bulk of the tariff incidence continues to fall on U.S. firms and consumers. These findings are consistent with two other studies that report high pass-through of tariffs to U.S. import prices." Reporting from the Washington Post. Wall Street today, the Dow up 129, NASDAQ up 175, S&P up 38. One of the largest sewage spills, begins a USA Today article, in U.S. history, has turned into a political fight between the federal government and local officials. A sewage line recently collapsed in the Maryland suburbs of Washington, spilling at least 200 million gallons of raw sewage into the Potomac River, a key waterway surrounding the nation's capital. The spill has caused widespread public health concerns as E. coli bacteria is at dangerous levels in parts of the Potomac and underscored the risks posed by aging sewer infrastructure. That was the article at USA Today. This came up at today's White House briefing with Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
Sewage spill, the sewage pipe that broke on Potomac. Can you give us an update on the federal government's response? And officials have told CBS that some of that aging infrastructure is a concern, that this particular pipe wasn't even of the most urgent concern. Do you know if the government is looking into which other pipes could be at risk of collapsing?
Well, the next step in this process is for any of the three local jurisdictions involved, whether that's the Commonwealth of Virginia, the state of Maryland and Governor Moore, or the District of Columbia, to step forward and to ask the federal government for help and to ask for the Stafford Act to be implemented here so that the federal government can go and take control of this local infrastructure that has been abandoned and neglected by Governor Moore in Maryland for far too long. In fact, it's no secret that Maryland's water and infrastructure have been in dire need of repair. Their infrastructure has received a nearly failing grade in the 2025 report card from the American Society of Civil Engineers. This is the same grade they've received 5 years earlier. There has been no improvement under the leadership of Governor Moore. He's clearly shown he's incapable of fixing this problem, which is why President Trump and the federal government are standing by to step in. And for all of the environmentalists in the room and across the District of Columbia, let's all hope and pray that this governor does the right thing and ask President Trump to get involved, because it will be an ecological and environmental disaster if the federal government does not step in to help. But of course, we need the state and local jurisdictions to make that formal request. That's part of the legal process to move forward. Peter.
So you said that any of the three Democrats just need to ask. A few minutes ago, Maryland's Governor Wes Moore asked. He said, if the president wants me to ask nicely, our response is this. Please, Mr. President, do your job.
To which I say, I'll ask the president and we will provide you with the next steps. But in all seriousness, the federal government has been preparing plans. The White House has been in contact with FEMA, with the Army Corps of Engineers, with the Environmental Protection Agency. Again, we've been standing by. This is a problem we want to fix, not just for the federal government, but for everyone who lives in the District of Columbia, including all of you. So you're welcome.
To your point about that, there are a lot of events coming up for America 250. The president wants people from all over to come to the nation's capital. Is he worried that by the summer, the Potomac River will still smell like poop?
He is worried about that, which is why the federal government wants to fix it, and we hope that the local authorities will cooperate.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt at her news conference day at the White House. Maryland Governor Wes Moore, a Democrat, spoke at a Board of Public Works meeting today, and he posted a few minutes on X.
I know that everybody has seen the president's tweet about the sewage pipe spill. It is riddled with insults, but it's also riddled with massive inaccuracies. It is worth time to actually be able to correct the record and to talk about accurately what actually happened and what's been done. As you might know, on January 19th of 2026, a section of the Potomac Interceptor sewage line collapsed near the Clara Barton Parkway and I-495. But the president's tweet actually failed to mention a few things. First, that for the past century, the federal government has been responsible for the Potomac Interceptor. This sewage pipe that he is talking about is on federal land. And over these past 4 weeks, the Trump-Vance administration has failed to act. This federal administration has been shirking its responsibilities and putting people's health at risk. The second thing, on Friday, Maryland agencies and D.C. Water presented a major 2-hour legislative hearing in the Maryland General Assembly and provided updates on the cleanup and also the status of water quality. Trump's EPA was invited, and they refused to attend. Maryland, on the other hand, has stepped up to protect its residents, to protect drinking water, and to ensure accountability. Third, Maryland officials were on site within hours of the leak to do our part to coordinate the response and to ensure that the public was protected. Since the spill occurred, the Maryland Department of the Environment has been monitoring bacteria levels, coordinating with local jurisdictions, and conducting multiple site inspections. MDE issued a precautionary closure to a shellfish harvesting area from Charles County to Route 301, and in coordination with the Maryland Department of Health, counties have issued public health advisories and will track ongoing water quality sampling. Testing shows bacteria levels decreasing over time and significantly lower concentrations farther downstream from the site of the initial spill. So Maryland will continue monitoring and remain engaged throughout the full remediation and continue to partner with leaders in the District of Columbia and the Commonwealth of Virginia as part of our larger coordinated response. We believe in being good neighbors, but to blame Maryland in this, when this is a DC pipe on federal land, is asinine, it is disingenuous, absurd, and politically motivated. If this federal administration wants to show up to take action, Maryland will work collaboratively, as we always do, to be responsive and help to keep our people informed about the plan and to remediate change. But if the president wants me to ask nicely, my response is this: please, Mr. President, do your job.
Maryland Governor Wes Moore, a Democrat, at a Board of Public Works meeting, posting that video on his X account. From WTTW, Chicago's PBS station, facing a projected $2.2 billion gap and massive uncertainty over federal funding flowing into Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker on Wednesday proposed a $56 billion state budget plan for fiscal year 2027 beginning July 1st. That number reflects a 1.6% increase in spending from fiscal year 2026, which senior budget officials in the governor's office say is due almost entirely to increased expenses tied to medical costs, pensions, and evidence-based funding for school districts. That was from WTTW. Governor Pritzker, a Democrat, spoke about federal funding and what he says is being held up in his State of the State address today in Springfield, Illinois. Governor J.B. Pritzker, Democrat of Illinois, giving his State of the State address in Springfield. C-SPAN has been covering a number of the State of the State addresses by governors around the country. You can find them at cspan.org, our video library. Los Angeles Times writing the UN Security Council is set to hold a high-level meeting Wednesday on the Gaza ceasefire deal and Israel's efforts to expand control in the West Bank before world leaders head to Washington to discuss the future of the Palestinian territories at the first gathering of President Trump's Board of Peace. The UN session in New York was originally scheduled for Thursday, but was moved up after Trump announced the board's meeting for the same date, and it became clear that it would complicate travel plans for diplomats planning to attend both. That was from the L.A. Times. Rosemary DiCarlo, United Nations Undersecretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, addressed the Security Council today.
In the occupied West Bank, meanwhile, the situation is deteriorating rapidly. There, Israeli forces continued large-scale operations across the West Bank, frequently involving live fire and raising serious concerns about the use of lethal force. Widespread raids have been accompanied by home takeovers, mass detentions, movement restrictions, and repeated displacement of Palestinian families, particularly in the north. Attacks by Palestinians against Israelis and confrontations between Palestinian and Israeli security forces have also continued. Israeli authorities also expanded operations in areas around Jerusalem and extended their operations in the northern West Bank. These developments unfolded alongside continued settlement expansion, rising settler violence, and accelerated demolitions and evictions in East Jerusalem. We are witnessing the gradual de facto annexation of the West Bank as unilateral Israeli steps steadily transform the landscape. I echo the Secretary General's grave concern regarding the Israeli Security Cabinet's reported decision to authorize a series of enforcement measures and transfer of authorities in areas A and B of the occupied West Bank. If implemented, these measures will constitute a dangerous expansion of Israeli civil authority in the occupied West Bank, including in sensitive areas like Hebron.
Rosemary DiCarlo, United Nations Undersecretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, addressing today's UN Security Council meeting on the Middle East. Focus as well on rebuilding Gaza, and on Thursday, President Trump plans to host a Board of Peace meeting. We'll have coverage on C-SPAN. And thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the latest in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal, our live forum inviting you to discuss the latest issues in government, politics, and public policy from Washington and across the country. Coming up Thursday morning, Vance Ginn, formerly with the Office of Management and Budget, talks about the future of AI and its potential impact on jobs and energy in the U.S. Then former acting CDC Director, Dr. Richard Besser, discusses Trump administration actions dealing with public health. And the chair of the America 250 Commission, Rosie Rios, talks about the upcoming events and programs surrounding the country's 250th birthday this year. C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Join in the conversation live at 7 Eastern Thursday morning on C-SPAN, C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app, or online at cspan.org.